Welcome to Prepping for the Studio. If you're a musician or musical artist that wants to learn more about what goes on, how to prepare, or how to make the most out of your studio session, you're in the right place. Prepping for the Studio. Hello and welcome back to Prepping for the Studio, the podcast for musicians who want to learn more about what goes on in the studio, how to prepare, and how to make the most out of their time and money. I'm Roy Silverstein, and I'm joined by my co-host, Brian Scheuble.
Howdy doody.
How you doing, Brian?
I'm pretty good. Little rain outside, but that's all good.
We need the rain.
Absolutely.
100%. We're in season 2 of the podcast, and that means we have guests. And today we have Max Allyn from Recording Fund.
Hello, Max.
Well, howdy.
How are you doing, Max?
I'm doing fantastic, folks. How are you guys?
We're doing well. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Absolutely.
Recording Fund is a really cool organization. You basically contacted me several years ago, and you were kind of going around talking to different people about this idea of how do we, help musicians fund their recordings, i.e. Recording Fund, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I just think that this is going to be a great topic that's a little adjacent to what we usually talk about on Prepping for the Studio, but an important one because it is part of the process is how am I going to pay for going to the studio, right?
Budgets.
Absolutely.
Yeah, figuring that out is pretty important. So if you could tell us a little bit about your background and Recording Fund and how it started and why you started it and that kind of thing.
This is my spiel. I'm a born and raised in the womb, kicking along to the band musician. Came from musician folks. I literally have a photo over there that's like probably 2 months after I came out of the womb, my mom is gigging, and she still gigs. That led to being a musician, drums first instrument, then learn guitar. Being a musician, I also love the inner workings of just about anything. So it led to production. Oh, how do we make recordings?
Mm-hmm.
And then if you have a knack or interest for that, that's like, you could dive into that so deep forever,
yes.
Every aspect of it, right?
Totally.
For many years, I was a producer, and along with being a musician, I helped people make recordings from the ground up.
Nice.
And after many years of doing that, I sound like I'm 1,000 years old, but I'm not. It just, after a couple decades of doing that, a couple things became really clear in the United States, at least. But I think overall, what we've done with music is we've put it entirely into the market. Mm-hmm. We've said this human process is, let's just put it all out there. And if you're good enough, somebody's going to invest in you.
Mm-hmm. And
that doesn't really square with why I made records. Sure, you have to charge. Everybody has to make a living.
Right.
But simultaneously, boy, I would make a lot of records that I was barely getting paid anything because I really liked the person.
Right.
And I thought the music might be cool, and I knew that I could create something that would also help propel my career as a producer forward, right? So there was a lot of heart in it. Mm-hmm. So the question became, why don't we have a better non-marketized function for supporting music, full stop.
Right.
And I haven't found the why, but I definitely have a lot of evidence that we do not actually have a non-marketized function. And, in comparison to all the other countries on the planet, all the industrialized, westernized, wealthy nations have robust funding for culture, for their culture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Even countries with massively smaller GDPs than the US. So we've been kind of stuck in the mud. The National Endowment of the Arts has been spending the same amount of money on music since like 1965.
Wow.
No adjustment.
Whoa.
It's crazy.
Crazy.
So then it might have been high. Now it's low. So that's the inception of Recording Fund. Recording Fund is a charity,
it's a nonprofit.
Yeah, it's a nonprofit alternative funding model for music, but that means that we're a publicly supported charity that gives no strings attached grants to artists to record their music.
Amazing.
Mm-hmm. That's cool.
Yeah, no strings attached. That's what more can you ask for as an artist? Like, hey, I'm getting basically a grant, right? Like essentially.
That's the language. We give out grants. And those grants, again, have no strings attached to them. So the strings that we would normally discuss in music, right, is ownership of that master recording.
Right.
Some sort of ownership or participation in the possible monetary side of the publishing, meaning like the copyright of the song,
Right.
We don't participate in any of that, for better or worse. I've had really robust, funky conversations with everybody about why we should or shouldn't be doing that.
Okay.
But ultimately, yeah, we don't get involved in any of that because it has been my intention from the get-go to not try to be some sort of, we're not trying to make bets. In the long run, we're not trying to make bets on these artists in terms of which one's going to pop,
Right.
quotation marks, pop or be big or this, that, or the other thing. Why I say in the long run is that to get this thing even remotely off the ground, sure, we actually do have to make very calculated choices about the stories that we tell with the limited amount of grants that we can have been able to give out, right? We need to be able to tell a story with that makes it easier for me to talk to somebody that has less knowledge about the music industry and goes, man, that's really cool that you helped them. I want to help you.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So, but ultimately, I've run a small label before with friends, and I don't like trying to be the kingmaker. I don't like trying to be the it person that knows what the sound is. I think artists just make cool music. I think we're always going to have the market side of it. That's always going to exist. I'm not going to propose that we abolish that. There's enough money in the world. Let's also give them a little support outside of that.
I love it.
Because that support goes a long way.
Totally. I mean, I remember looking at the back of a record from a Canadian artist and seeing how the Canadian government had funded this record, at least partially. And I was like, what?
Yeah, right. That's really cool.
We don't do that.
Yeah. I was talking to Adam Lewis over at Planetary Group a couple weeks ago, which I'm sure you guys have worked on records from artists that have done their radio promo through Planetary. They've been around forever.
Okay.
And he was saying still, many of the artists that are coming through and doing, they're all a bunch of kind of, maybe, how do we say, upper level indie artists. Many of them are getting grants from the Canadian government. Many of them are somehow working the system, and many of them are Canadian, but, he just was pointing out like that is still a thing. And I always point out, even like Courtney Barnett, right?
Okay.
Her first big breakout record was funded by the Australian Council for the Arts.
Wow.
Her first tour in the United States, I believe, was funded by the same organization.
Amazing.
That is belief in that country's artists.
Right.
They didn't get a piece of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's real kind of amazing support. Yeah. For artists of, from a country, from wherever they come from.
Yeah. That's really cool.
So for a band or artist that wants to look into getting a grant from Recording Fund, like what's the process like?
So we have a grant application at our website, recordingfund.org/apply.
Okay.
And that application is probably roughly around 50 questions long. So it's kind of long and robust, but it's not essay questions. It is meant to allow people to write in as much or as little as they want. And how do you do an application is a big question, but you go there, you fill out the application, but you have the opportunity to decide, am I going to write a one sentence response to why this is important to me? Or like, what would a grant be? What would the impact be? Or what's my plan? Or do I write a paragraph? Sometimes I get, like 2,400 plus words per application, that's kind of the high end, right?
Gotcha.
Sometimes I get 500.
Okay.
But go fill out an application. And then the real trick of applications right now is that we are incredibly underfunded. We're ostensibly a one-person operation. I have a couple of board members that cheer me on, but my life is living and breathing, going like, how are we going to really do this? And then we have a volunteer selection committee that every 3 months reviews those applications and picks, say one to three people. 1 to 3 artists that can actually be funded at that point in time. If we had a lot more funding, boy, I'd like to do a lot more than that. That's my dream. I just think that would be the coolest. But it's really limited to our ability to get supporters, funders, to understand why this is important. And I think that's kind of an uphill battle in today's industry.
Yeah.
But I still tell people, get their applications in, and then all those applications get sifted through, and then they get presented to a volunteer selection committee, which anybody's welcome to volunteer for. It's a really low stakes commitment. We make it really easy. We show you how to do it. And then, you vote on between 10 and 30 artists over the period of a month. And so it really gets thinned down over a 3-month period. We might get we could get 300 to 600 applications.
Wow.
And so we are really having to thin it way down. Again, I'd love to support more things. And I think as we grow, those applications will grow. And also it will get harder to figure out who to support.
Yeah, right.
Because I just know that as the word spreads out there, more artists, more beautiful stories are going to, fill that folder. And we're going to go like, how are we going to do this? So
yeah, this is a tough problem here. So the selection is actually democratized, sort of, if you will. Like you're saying, like other various people can become part of that. Process?
Yeah, totally. Volunteering for it doesn't give you an automatic slot in there. We try to balance out any single committee, but that's difficult. So what we ask is for people to be diverse in their mindset as possible when listening and reviewing these applications. But it is democratized in the sense that we are trying to get community feedback on the process. We're trying to implore people to get involved and listen and go like, well, I only listen to X, Y, and Z, but I understand why this should be supported. That's super big. We love to get polarized in our music listening, right? Well, I can't stand that stuff or this stuff.
Right.
That's probably why I ended up doing this, because I love so many things. I'll be on like a top 40 country record being like, I cannot believe they made this. And then I'll go way over in the other direction. I'll go back to some like, something I grew up on that's like the indiest of like crusty roots sort of thing, right? And so yes, it's democratized. And so all those individuals that participate in the volunteer selection committee also can read through the application. We have a summary of it, and then they can see under the hood and look at the whole thing. So again, maybe a better answer towards your question just a second ago is go fill out an application, be honest, be earnest, put your heart into it. And if it doesn't happen this time, we're going to continue telling people to continue reapplying. We're going to be honing in that application probably in the second half of this year, really trying to, get to the right version of what it is to try to do this. The application process is pretty robust. I don't know if on this wall behind me is the application process put on note cards on my wall. I'm trying to go like, how the hell do we do this?
Yeah.
What are we even trying to do? And then what gets selected out of there, ultimately, we put a high premium on drive, determination, and diversity. Don't tell the government I said diversity, but I mean, come on. Like, that's what this is, right? Almost all nonprofits are a version of the scary DEI word, right? Let's bring people in. Let's make it more inclusive. Let's give more people a chance at this. But I always say the spiel is drive gets you out of bed in the morning, right? Determination gets you to the end of the day. And we want to be diverse because we know that music actually is not at the major leagues of music. It's not that diverse actually. So
can we talk about what's happening in the major label world right now as far as what they've become and how they work with artists at this point? Because it's not the same as it was before, right?
Yeah.
It seems like you have to already be like this big thing if you're going to get picked up by a major, right? Like, am I right?
Yeah. That's what it seems like to me. And, some say, well, they're just grifting off the things that have already been done. I agree that for the most part they are, because that is what their mission statement is. Most of the larger labels, if not just the majors and all of the sub-majors that come down, will do all of that, not talking the Merlin world, right? All of that has a built-in needs to be profitable sort of mindset, which is okay. That is the reality. They have tremendous overhead in theory, but to me, it feels like they're somewhat detached from music anymore. You've probably heard and said yourself many times, there is no more traditional artist development anymore. There's no A&R. There's no really kind of like seeing a diamond in the rough and developing it.
Exactly.
The only place I think you still see that is in the long play Disney space, where you get a kid at like 13, you put them on some TV shows, you put out the record. It's Sabrina Carpenter, right? That's a very expensive long play that is it's turning out really well for them, but otherwise I think the industry is so reactive, and I don't think the industry it's music is a product to the largest part of the music industry. It's just a product.
It
is not it is not the universal language that connects us all. And if they think of it like that, they're thinking of it like that in terms of how to, this is it, right? What we did is we put a economic crank right in the middle of a human process. What the label system is. We do that with everything. You want a house? Crank, 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 crank. You want happiness? Crank, crank, crank. That's where we're at. So of course they're going to start shoring their bets and saying, well, you've already done X, Y, and Z. You're a better bet for us. You're a better bet for us because the margins are getting stranger. The labels feel the effects of streaming economy too, which is kind of a sideways system. And they're probably only looking to make better and better bets. And there's a changing guard of the sort of individuals that are making these decisions at the label system, which I'm sure you've at some way seen this. You go like, well, that's a kid. They're just like cruising SoundCloud trying to find the next person to drop $100,000 on.
Right.
Like we've all heard those stories of like the way it's actually going out there. It's not, seems disconnected from like, I think why we make records.
Yeah. And the traditional way that labels operated of developing an artist, I mean, in a lot of cases, I think that was part of what they did, and they would let artists fail for a while too, like records not do so well and keep them on. And okay, let's, help you get to the next level here. And that's just not happening anymore.
Yeah. The labels are just so, I don't have an answer for this, but I just don't really believe in shareholder capitalism, at least in this particular arena, because now all of a sudden you have the interest of creating return for the shareholders against the interest of music.
Art.
Right. We see this.
Yeah.
We see this in so many places, but that is, I don't know that off the top of my head. I mean, I don't know that they all have the same sort of exposure in that sense, but they all also end up in a system with like Spotify, which absolutely has that sort of incentive. And so, that in any equation changes fundamentally what they are trying to do. They are not looking for the same thing that they might have been in the past, but I wholeheartedly don't think that what they're looking for is the same essence as what is actually driving all of this artistic beauty that is coming out of these people. It's just the meeting of these different worlds. Again, it's just like let's put a crank on that, let's pour the gasoline.
Right. We'll take you to an even higher level, but it's kind of sad because like these people who they've already gotten to an amazing level all on their own. It's almost like, well, why do I need the label?
Money, right? It almost just becomes a leverage thing. It's incredibly expensive to do these things. And I think that's the narrative that we see now. We see a lot of, you don't need the label. And a lot of this is true. I don't know that all artists know that. A lot of them want that. They want that experience. The other almost more insidious part of what we've done to music in the last 100 years, and arguably before that, is that we've created this sense of fame. They believed in me. Now I'm this thing. That's a whole other part of humanity that needs some sort of, I'm not going to say reckoning, but it's going to get itself sorted out. It's maybe not this millennia. And those things, so that's all kind of happening in there. But so people still do want the label because they want that prestige, or they want that thing,
association with others. I mean, that's kind of one thing I think about labels is like when you get on one, like now you're associated with the other artists on that label. That's cool. I can understand that.
Yeah, it's a big achievement. I mean, let's make no mistake of it. It is a huge achievement to get a record contract or a publishing contract to do these things. And I don't want to, again, on the broken record, it's a huge achievement and it is a monetary deal for that other party. Labels like, we are looking to crank money out of you.
Yeah, you got to be careful. You gotta get yourself a lawyer.
One side's like, oh my God, I finally have been recognized for everything that I've tried and been doing in my life. And the other side is like, okay, we better hit Q2 reports on this. You know, we better get them on the road right now. Let's cut all of the side spending, and we got to nail this because we're going to give our earnings report in the fall.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like
100%.
its emotions meet, you know, the economic part, and that's the world we live in.
It's the music business. There's a business part of it. Yeah.
It is a business. And I think that's just trying to language what we all go like, man, what is happening with music? Well, it's like, what's happening in the world? It's humanity meets all these structures, constructs that we put on top of humanity, you know? So
what about in the indie label space, I'm going to call it? Because when I was a bit younger, as a 20-something-year-old, like working at college radio and stuff like that, like there was all this like robust indie labels that I knew about. Like, I mean, I'm from Chicago too. So in Chicago, there was Thrill Jockey and Touch and Go and Drag City and Minty Fresh. And then there was other ones that are all around the country, like Secretly Canadian and Matador and like
Epitaph.
Yeah. Are they still also funding recordings and like what's up with the indie label world at this point?
I think there's a fair amount of them that are. That's, you know, that brings us to the Merlin umbrella, right? Of
what do you mean by Merlin
music,
umbrella?
which is, well, you know, there's three majors, then there's this other entity that is all of the indies on some level that's covered by Merlin's independent distribution umbrella of services, and they all kind of piled up underneath that, and that's like the largest community of independent music. So
is Merlin, what is Merlin?
Merlin, we would have to look it up real quick exactly, but Merlin is, I believe, it's the largest independent records. Merlin Music. Digital music licensing for independent music companies, right?
Okay.
So, you know, we get the digital age coming along, and they say, well, we can be your pipeline. We can be your real distribution arm for that. And they ended up amassing like almost all of them, you know, and everybody's under that. And I think there was a lot of, don't make a mistake about it. Most independent little labels will grow as much as they possibly can until they probably look more like largers, right? You know, that's okay. That's kind of the system they have to be in. I think a lot of the labels that you're also pointing out, you know, some of them had to go under, some of them, you know, it didn't make sense. Maybe they lost the artist. Maybe maybe the deal was, hey, I can sell this to this other company. Like everything kind of verticalizes into these silos, right? And I think they face the same headwinds. I think they're like, well, what do we put money into? And look for a return. I think that there just lies the most tricky part of this is you're betting. It's a bet on music.
Yeah.
That's fantastic that it's a bet on music. And it's also like, that's kind of a shit show. You know, that's like,
it's tough.
I don't want to bet on it, though. I guess I am totally betting on it at this point. But, you know, I think all of those indies are put into that same place, though they have a little bit more leeway to, you know, they're not trying to cover the same sort of overhead that the majors are on the line for, in theory. And, you know, all of those indies still represent a whole subset of music that isn't the majors foray, a whole different set of aesthetics in music that we might call indie, right? That's kind of where I think sometimes what I think of as indie. Yeah, there's a different aesthetic to it, you know, there's a different presentation to it. There's a different, you know, piece of it. And they can still represent a lot of that. I guess, you know, a better answer to your question, do I know if they are actually funding the way that they used to at this point? I don't, but I think that they too are up against the same headwinds. You know, we're all still kind of recovering from the change of the music industry, right? You know, CDs, tapes, and vinyl. Vinyl's coming back, but that's an expensive game,
right?
And I think a lot of people buy vinyl, but I don't think they listen to it.
I've heard that it can be just a thing you put on your wall. It's like, you know, collector's item sort of.
Yeah.
I think so. You know, I think that it's a great thing to sell people, but there's no chance in hell that people are actually listening to, in my mind, that people are actually listening to vinyl at the rate at which they're buying vinyl, you know, making vinyl so prominent. So yeah, I think they face the same issues. And back to what's really happening, the majors are trying to buy up all of their shares. They're trying to disrupt everything. They're trying to get into that indie market. The majors are like,
just swallowing it up.
Why would we only be in the business of trying to break large artists? Let's buy into the distribution arms everywhere we possibly can. Let's get a piece of market share of everything that we don't currently exist in, because year after year right now, independent music continues to grow in a way that it's starting to eat into the market share of the major labels. Again, shareholder responsibility dictates that they need to try to acquire more, to have a larger piece of the market, to ensure the return on the stocks that you buy, over there in Robinhood or something, right? Or the parts of it that are private, which I don't think that there are many parts, same thing. They're still looking for return, and there's nothing wrong with the return, minus we haven't reconciled how to do that in a humane way at this point in the music industry.
Yeah, I do feel that we have undervalued music extremely, and
wildly so.
Yeah, and it's crazy. So if you're an artist out there, band, whatever, besides recording fund, what other ways might you raise some funds for recording at this point, do you think?
That's a good question. I keep on seeing an individual on the socials. I always forget their name, but they are helping like folk bands, like Americana folky bands, I believe, like indie folk, let's say. I think they're pitching that they can help them do GoFundMe campaigns.
Okay.
They feel like they've landed on a method that's actually connecting people to that. The other way that which people are funding their records is, hopefully getting lucky, but most people I know are funding their records off. Most of the applications that we get, which I've looked through thousands, are people self-funding with maybe a little money that they make in the music space.
Sure.
But a lot of it is money that comes from outside the music space.
Yeah. Just their regular jobs or whatever, right?
Just their regular jobs, their other creative works. There are, as we all know, there's a lot of artists that are able to do side sync work, that is actually lucrative for them, or they're able to do sound design stuff, either in a big sense or in a more local sense for certain art communities I've seen.
Using their skills as a musician in other ways in other spaces that actually pay more.
Yeah, which we would tell everybody to do on some level. Like, that's the thing. If you want to actually be functional in the music business, you should probably learn some other parts of it and see how you can monetize those. Right. Because I don't know that we can say with a straight, real face that everybody's song will be listened to.
No.
But everybody's voice should be contributed to this, right? And again, people argue, they say, well, there's too much music out there. We have 150,000, 120,000, whatever the amount of tracks going up daily.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. But I'm never going to say we should limit people from contributing. I didn't design the system that they're uploading it to. That wasn't my short-sightedness. I have a lot of short-sightedness, but it wasn't wow, everybody's going to really everybody's going to bring up all their songs, So back to how artists are funding their recordings. Boy, I think they're working their ass off.
Yeah.
They're putting aside a little bit of money, whatever that studio rate is. I'm assuming that's the same sort of artist that you guys are working with over there, or in your own spaces, or have known over the years. They're like
99%. Yeah, I mean,
I work a job.
Yeah,
I squirrel away a little bit here. I get just enough to get a day or two.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
which
basically
parlays right back into how the hell do you be prepared at that point? Because the being prepared is directly related to what happens in the studios. They start freaking out. They're like, oh my God, I'm on the shot clock right now. I have 8 hours or 10 hours, whatever the thing is.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know it's going to work out.
Right. It's all the more reason why you have to be prepared, because you probably can only afford a little bit of studio time.
Yeah, because you can only get a day or two, and whatever that costs, it doesn't matter who and what level you're doing that at, that is still fundamental to what's happening. And so that's actually, that's kind of at the core of the recording fund ethos, is that actually we know that that's a critical time, and actually why people want a record label is that they don't want to feel like they're losing their money on it at some level. They want to feel supported. They need extra money to do it.
Yeah.
The response that we've had from grantees and studio is actually to feel like there's a little more support in here, and that my couple days of working isn't getting lost in a bad studio day. It's helping change the quality of their creative experience, their creative expression in the studio at that point in time. Money does a weird thing to the creative process.
I mean, it can be corruptive or it can be freeing, I suppose.
Constraints are perfect. We all need constraints. Like creative constraints are totally needed. Budgetary restraints, time restraints, because you have to make decisions.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, Brian, you used to talk about how you felt like a lot of money was wasted on records you did.
Oh, yeah. Back in the day. Yeah, totally.
The labels were just like, here's $250,000. And like, so people just spent a lot of time doing stuff that had nothing to do with making the record.
Food budgets.
Yeah.
Now we're all reeling from that. We're still reeling from that, where everything is tighter now. Everybody's looking to get more done with less time, right? Which is tricky in probably half or more of musical formats. You know, you can get a lot done if you are only using entirely already hyped up samples and loops that are already as bright and impactful as you need them, and you just slam a vocal on top of that. But if you were anywhere in the pantheon of actually recording music,
musicians playing instruments,
microphones, instruments, trying to find the take, trying to figure out the blend of those things. It actually takes time. I get that question all the time. People are like, well, can't you just press a button now? And I'm like,
Didn't Daniel X say that it basically costs nothing to make a record now?
he did. And, you know, that argument, the cost of creating is being driven down so much that you could, you know, he at one point also said you should just release more music, which I think dovetails us into we're undervaluing music, right?
Yeah. And now, a word from our sponsor, Rarefied Recording. Oh, that's me. I would be remiss if I didn't mention my studio, Rarefied Recording, and the services I offer there. The studio itself was built from the ground up, from the masterful plans of Mr. Wes Lachaud, so it sounds fantastic both in the control room and the live room. A 32-channel Neve Genesis console holds center court and is complemented by a wide array of outboard gear, instruments, and microphones. Your music will be in good company. If you live in the San Diego area, just head on over to rarefiedrecording.com to learn more and book a tour. You can also hear examples of my tracking and mixing work. If you aren't lucky enough to live in San Diego, let me be the first to suggest the idea of a destination recording experience. San Diego is BBB approved. The Better Business Bureau? No, beaches, burritos, and beer. Even if you're not a beach person, who's to complain with temperatures that are very often in the 70s? Even the winter months are averaging in the mid-60s. And being relatively dry, rain is unlikely to get in your way. The studio is very centrally located, and you can get to just about anywhere in the area in 15 to 20 minutes. Even Mexico. And while burritos are technically not a food you find in Mexico itself, San Diego has taken the concept to blissful culinary heights. You can't go hardly 100 yards here without running into a little taco shop that will be 10 times better than whatever options you have in your town. If Mexican isn't your thing, no worries. There are tons of great restaurants in the area, including a barbecue place 3 blocks away that rivals anything I've tried in Texas. And adjacent to it is one of over 150 craft breweries in San Diego. If you love beer, we gotcha. The West Coast IPA style is a specialty here, but we've got brewers doing all kinds of beers, and several have tasting rooms in walking distance. Did I mention that accommodations are available? So head on over to rarefiedrecording.com and reach out for a quote today. That's RAREFIED recording.com. And now back to the episode.
Realistically, any record that's really listened to, that really goes far in capturing people's ears, probably took a considerable amount of time to make. And if it wasn't a considerable amount of time to make that one recording, it took a considerable amount of time for the people associated to making that recording to develop the skills to do that in a short amount of time.
Yes.
Like you can't skip go. Like you got to put in the work, right?
Yes.
Again, we can use like a sample program like Splice or something. We can get all these big, bright, beautiful sounds. It actually gets you pretty far, but there's still a lot that needs to happen. So any recording that really gets listened to a lot probably took a long time to make. At least a couple of days, if not some really valuable long days in a studio. Represents a lot of money. I don't have the answer, but just imagine, what is the actual cost of 1 hour of music in that pantheon? Like the higher end indies to like the big major tracks. The cost of the actual music in that 1 hour. You have 10 or 15 tracks in there.
Yeah, I don't know. I couldn't really put a number on it.
Well, I mean, just at bare minimum, let's say let's say you're a producer. We give out $1,250 grants, right? And we hope that an artist can get at least one song, maybe even just finished. Maybe some can record it front to back. Maybe some can't.
Yeah.
Maybe they can finish two. They can it adds to being able to do another day in the studio, get a little bit of mixing done, right? It's all budgetary. Our grants are small. We're not trying to be a market maker. But even if you just did that math, right? You have 10 songs on there. That's $12,500 per hour of music. $1,000 to do a song is the lowest on the spectrum, right? It's probably $3,000 just in the grand scheme of things. But doing a bigger record is easily $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 a song. If you're a major, it's 30,
right?
40. And the mixing alone is 15, right? So now all of a sudden we're looking at an hour of music, which we all listen to an hour of music all the time. We put on our Spotify, we put on our Tidal. That hour of music probably has a realistic value of $100,000, $200,000 when you really do all the math. We listen to music nonstop. It just drips, and you pay $11.99 a month.
Right. It's so undervalued. Yeah.
All of the world's music,
basically,
for $11.99. That's like trillions of dollars, probably.
Yeah.
If we really did the math, if not just hundreds of billions of dollars of value out there being just given away at a price that a company can reach the tipping point of subscriptions that will make them money.
Right.
That's what's happening.
Yeah.
That's undervalued.
Yeah. It's bad.
That does not make sense, right? That artist puts it out. It's just so painful. Every artist that you work with over there, they put the song out and they are forced into, unless you go to Bandcamp, they are just forced to play ball with the game that they get paid a third of a cent.
Yeah.
Let's just change it a little bit.
I know.
And let's change the incentive structure. That's what's sideways about it. Music is not owned by music. It never was, but it should be. Music should be owned by music, like in the library of music, like by musicians, for musicians, for the best of musicians. And we should radically rethink all of these ideas because none of them have anything to do with music. Daniel Ek recently has been about their main competition is silence. So if they can put a podcast, a talking something, sleep music, whatever in your brain, cool. They're not in it for music.
Right. He's
in it to create things that keep you in the app and wanting to go up in a subscription value.
Right. Yeah.
Give me a break. That is not why I figured out how to record music or play music.
Right.
Or spent the way beyond 10,000 hours going like, man, if I just move that snare drum around, or like, can we do that take one more time, or like the 100th take of a guitar part on my own personal music,
Totally.
So that's some deep rambles there. You'll be like, we'll edit.
Now I'm depressed.
Yeah. I mean, I'm hoping
sometimes I feel like the Grim Reaper of music.
It's all good.
I mean, are you seeing anything coming down the line that gives you some hope about a better system?
No, I appreciate you asking that because I know for a fact that I would have a board member or two that would be like, dude, you got to be more positive. I'm encouraged by the fact that people are still making. I think there's incredible music being made out there.
Yeah, for sure.
I think that there's a growing swell of discontentment with with maybe the way the system works.
Yep.
I think you see some of that. If you guys watched the Grammys, you saw that with Chappell Roan calling out the label system in terms of healthcare.
Okay, yeah.
And living wage. And, I saw one individual get really upset that Chappell Roan would say that. And they said that they're totally misguided and too green and really should earn their seat at the table. They wrote it in the Hollywood Reporter. The dude got beat up for saying that.
Wow.
Because actually what it did was it created a groundswell. I think that just music just needs to go through a groundswell, And I think more people are starting to kind of get any sense that musicians are actually humans.
Right.
They're real people. And
if you want to support this artist that you love, like there's got to be a better way. I mean, than
Yeah.
the 0.3 cents or whatever.
I'm encouraged also, and I was talking to a friend that knows more than I about this. I'm encouraged that Bandcamp is still functional.
Yep.
They've gone through a lot of ownership changes that were worrisome, right? Being bought by Epic Games was scary. And then Epic has to go through a massive, efficiency exercise, right? Where they just cut. I was very scared that SongTrader bought it, actually, because I know that SongTrader is not solvent. But it seems as though SongTrader is giving Bandcamp a lot of room to be Bandcamp.
Okay.
And not trying to change them, right? I think that that's the worry. When I say I'm worried about watching them change ownership, my worry is that things like private equity or mergers create the incentive path for them to strip the hell out of Bandcamp. Now they did. They fired a lot of people, but as what I've been told is that they are actually allowing Bandcamp to be the ecosystem that it always was.
Okay.
And I always go, why doesn't Bandcamp get like an infusion of money to really take their website like out of 2002? But that might be missing the point, right? I might be missing the point on that. So I'm encouraged that that is still functional. And I wish
it's a good platform for selling merch too. Like I bought vinyl on Bandcamp recently.
Right. And I think that vinyl and all the things that I wonder if there could be, I don't know what it's going to be, but is there some sort of space out there that Bandcamp, with the support that's behind them, could kind of lead the way on a different model to do this? Essentially, on one way to look at Bandcamp right now is it's like you listen to your favorite artist on your streaming platform, but if you want to go support them, you go to Bandcamp.
Right.
Okay. Now you bet your ass that your favorite streaming platform, a la Spotify, is trying to take a piece out of that because they're trying to put more opportunities to buy merch and other things within Spotify, right? Funky. Yeah. But I wish there was a universe where more of that could happen in the same place and it wasn't Spotify, because I think they've just already shown their cards.
Yeah.
I think, is this very socialistic of me? I want music to be owned by musicians or musicians,
Yeah.
Like
when I listen only to band X for the month, like, shouldn't all my money go to them? That's not how it works right now in Spotify. Like,
no,
it goes to actually the biggest artists primarily, right? Like,
that model, the pro rata model, absolutely it's not artist centric in the way some of the models out there. And I am pleased to see artist centric models grow too. Like SoundCloud definitely rocked it, going to a more artist centric model. I think that's fantastic. I think we're still waiting to see exactly how that pans out. SoundCloud has been through the ringer. They've come out on top on some level. There was a point at which they were going to fall apart, but they really they pulled it out. And so I think there are positive things. As tragic as the fires in LA were, I think we actually saw a lot of support for music come out. I think the Grammys this year actually were an incredible, though they were the least viewed Grammys in like 10 years, they were really a show of support.
Yeah. Yeah, that was good to see.
I think the new narratives are positive. We're due for some sort of change.
I agree.
Yeah.
I
hope.
I mean, can you imagine a world without music?
No.
It's like watching a movie without music.
Yeah, it's terrible. I mean, it's like David Lynch, said something about like music's like water, it's like, it's that fundamental,
Yeah. And what do we do with water? We don't just let it pour out of the tap.
No,
right?
We don't just
music
turn on and
like
let it flow although it is a commodity, but
I know, and that's the unique position that we're in. It flows like water everywhere. Music is playing everywhere we go, and it is super devalued. What intrigues me sometimes, you think about every single pharmaceutical commercial out there.
Oh my gosh,
has a track, right? Ozempic did the spin on oh, it's magic.
Right.
There's the Sky Rizzy. Things are getting clearer. Still trying to figure out who wrote that song because they have made a bundle. The amount of money that pharmaceutical companies spend on advertising is unbelievable. It's like they spend something like $23 billion a year.
Wow.
That means they're going to make like 75 billion or something.
Gotta be.
It's something crazy, but we can fact check that. It's insane. All of that is driven by music. There's so much music driving all of that. And yet us three are having this conversation going like, wow, what is happening? Right. And as engineers, and I'm sure you feel this as a studio owner, you're like, dang, it gets kind of creaky some days. People saying, I don't have the money, or I got some software.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the budgets are tight, and a lot of people are doing stuff on their own. I mean, it begs the question, one of my questions I had for you was like, part of what Recording Fund does isn't it, correct me if I'm wrong, but like you need to see that the applicants like have a plan to use a studio. Is that true? Or like, why is that important?
Yeah, actually, yeah, no, that's a great point. So our grants are awarded to the artists, but paid to the service providers that make the recordings happen. So this could be a producer, an engineer, mix engineers, the studio.
Yeah.
Each artist is going to do it differently, but we are not handing them over a check where they are going to distribute those funds. We get invoices from a studio or from an individual producer who's working at their, garage, space or whatever. And so that's helping us ensure that charitable dollars are going exactly where we say they are. It's helping us ensure that artists aren't putting them towards things like marketing or something. And it is going into the recording. It's not, it kind of puts us at odds with the amount of people, with the sort of people that are home recording. But our experience is that many times we'll see an application where somebody's like, I've been working on the recording, but I want to go into a studio to track, insert here.
Right.
Maybe it's better vocals because they don't feel confident about their vocal setup. Maybe they want to do strings or live drums.
Right.
Live drums are an incredibly hard thing to fake in a home studio.
Yeah.
You either got to be risky and be like, I know exactly how to get the best two mic sound possible, and that fits the vibe of your track. But that's not all drum sounds. We know that as engineers. You're like, certain songs need robust, real drum sounds, right?
A little more.
You can't actually fake that. And you can sample it all your way, but that's not every record. So we see a lot of people that are doing a hybrid of
Makes
these
sense.
things. And that's actually part of being prepared. We do ask, if a applicant makes it to the second round, we do ask things like, are you prepared? Are the songs ready? Are the songs finished? Right? Because that's one of the things we really do not want an artist to get stuck in, is trying to finish a song in a studio.
Yeah. We talk about
that. That happens, but we're trying to get out of that.
Yeah. You want to come in.
We don't want to be in that space.
Knowing the song, not writing it in the studio.
Because it's the best use of time. And then all of a sudden, if they don't know the song, somebody says a word and they get a third, right? That old adage. And I don't want anything to do with that, because all of a sudden that gets, all that gets tricky. So a lot of people are utilizing their own ability to record. And then they're still saying, well, I need help mixing. So I'm going to hire this person to mix. I'll give them my stems. I think that's perfectly fine. Until I'm proven wrong, I do not think that we will hit some sort of over 50% critical mass of artists being able to self-record and self-produce to a level where we literally say, well, can't you just press a button and just do it now?
Right.
They are two entirely separate processes.
Yes.
Writing a song, singing a song, performing a song, incepting the whole thing, and knowing how to record are just, they're different.
Yeah, different skill sets.
You might learn both.
Some people do.
But, and that's great and good for them. And maybe times are changing. But not everybody that goes, man, like a little kid that goes like, I love singing, goes like, I'm going to learn Logic tomorrow.
Right.
We see a couple of them on the internet where you're like, oh my God, that kid is so talented and they can't even see over the desk. What?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, but that's a minority.
Yeah. Again,
and
I don't see us.
It's not the best use of your time as an artist, I don't think, because if you can focus more on your songwriting and performance, I think that's really where the music is. And what we do is important to it too. But man, trying to wear both hats it takes you away from an important part.
Totally.
And I think many artists, again, we see many applications that are exactly that. Hey, I'm recording myself and I can get it so far, but I really want to go into a studio to like really take it to the next level. That does indicate a level of preparedness, that is valuable. Somebody once told me, I could have told myself, but I'm convinced somebody else told me. They said, the best way to make a record is to record it twice, which I think is to say, let's demo it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is
out
good.
A lot of stuff in a demo. Yeah.
You figure out a lot of stuff in a demo, right? You either go like, that's it, and we're not recording it again, or like, you know what? Yeah, it's gonna be a little slower. We're gonna change the key. I don't like those sounds. Like, it's the same as measure twice, cut once.
Yeah.
It's like the same universe.
I like that. I like that.
So,
measure twice, cut once. That's good.
Yeah, but no, which I have never done in my entire life. I love building. For years, I would tear apart every piece of cheap studio equipment that I could get and do my own DIY projects on making it better.
Okay.
Double check before you solder. The amount of things that I have soldered wrong 2 or 3 or 4 times in a row.
Yeah.
It's like ridiculous. Like, I need to take that advice. Measure twice, cut once is it, and I can be so impatient, but that all goes also into that land of being prepared. I think that's beautiful. That's again why we asked them to have the song, but also I think in versions of the application in the future, we want to know, like, have you demoed the song? It's okay if they don't.
Yeah.
We don't want to make people feel like they have to, but like, do you know what you want to achieve, even in the simplest,
right?
Like, it's like having references or something. Like, are you prepared? I'm sure, like, if you have somebody coming into the studio, I used to always tell people, like, if you have references, I want to hear them.
100%.
I want to know that we're speaking the same language.
Yeah, totally. It informs everything that I do, and I'm sure Brian would agree. Like, when we hear a reference, we're like, okay, this is the type of kick drum sound, this is the type of snare drum sound, so it changes which mic I'm going to use, it changes what kind of processing, what kind of everything. It
also gets confusing because the artist comes in with one song and then they're like, I want to sound like this, and you're like,
it's not going to be 100%. Let's put it that way. You're not that artist, it's not that studio, it's not that time, it's there's too many factors.
I know. I have producer friends that'll tell me that. They're like, well, I do this sort of sound, and an artist just came in and wanted like a dubstep techno thing, and you're like, like, I don't.
Yeah, we also have our limits.
Do you see my guitar collection? That is not what I do.
I had an artist that was very poet-like. There was a lot of speaking, and sort of vibey. And so I said, "Do you have any references?" And she sent me The Who, and it was one of their wine. Pete Townshend's doing the big. It was a rocker. And I was like, okay,
square that circle.
Yeah.
Well, that is again a valuable place. That's part of what we might put into later application processes. Like, we asked, do you know who you want to work with? And we mostly right now, and I think we'll keep it this way, we want an artist to have already identified where they want to spend the funds. Because also, in the very beginning days, there was a question of, can we be a resource for artists trying to find a producer? And I think that we can be, but we're going to be hesitant to do that in the funding process because we don't want to end up right in the middle of that. At the moment, I want those relationships to already be established so that we're not experimenting with the grant funds at the moment. That's a best case scenario, right? Lots of times you do have to say, well, I haven't used the studio, but I'm going to go in and do a thing. But I think, we're trying to identify also artists that have already kind of been there. They are doing it a little bit. They know what they're
that would help.
Pipeline, right? They know what the pipeline is. They know I'm going to go over to Rarefied. I'm going to cut drums in a couple of hours because we know what's going on, and then we can cut everything on top over the next. Like, they're just having that pipeline defined. I think also shows, that the artist is prepared, has done it a little bit. They're a little bit seasoned. They don't have to be, some big artists, but they are actually functional in this process.
Gotcha.
Good.
Yeah.
Another question, besides the recording stuff, tracking, mixing, mastering, I mean, what should artists be thinking about on their budget side of the whole record and the release and all that? I know maybe you don't fund that stuff, but as recording fund, but like that is like a bigger, top-down view of like, I'm not just making a recording, I have to get it out there and I have to promote it, right?
That is such a tricky place for us in music. Now it's like, Yeah, it is the question. If you make the record but nobody ever hears it, what's the point? And I have to deal with that question all the time in terms of, trying to find viable funding sources for us. And, that's a pretty tricky question for where we're at now. Yes, artists need to have some sort of plan. When we ask a question, that is, what do you have a release plan, and tell us about that? And we get a variety of 5-point plans to 95-point plans of everything that I'm going to do. I'm going to drip content out on the socials until this happens, then that happens. And that's all fantastic because, artists do need to find some way to break through the noise of the internet, I guess, to get people to pay attention to their music, which is just a strange way to have to do it now,
Yeah.
In a more ideal world, there would be more, I don't know if the word is egalitarian, but it would be more equal streaming space where you are actually being exposed to more and more things that are new.
Yeah.
They are not ghostwriters.
Oh, yeah. Or AI.
They are not ghostwriters or AI. But that's not the way it works. So the service that you are listening to music through is not going to help you be exposed to that artist that's trying to get your attention as well. Maybe a few years back it kind of was, but that they were still using ghostwriting services to create perfect playlists, as noted in that book Mood Machine. And so, we're all at this kind of difficult to reconcile path towards, it's like making the song, recording it is just one little part of the battle because you have to spend all the rest of your time trying to make the said content to get people to pay attention to it. So, I mean, what would I tell artists? Well, you got to make content. You got to figure out some sort of approach to getting people engaged in your song. And you're going to have to do a lot of that video stuff and figure out how to edit it. And you're going to have to get a lot of that stuff up consistently. I wish that wasn't the answer. I'm not saying that they should have it easy and everybody should just automatically listen. I think there's a good challenge in pushing an artist to figure out how to be vocal about their music. Hey, I made this. Here's what it means to me, and listen to it, because I think many times artists are like, I made it, and they're like, I don't want to share it.
Right.
Right? That's the deal. And I get that. So it has two sides to it. It's a real pain in the ass. It's a lot of work. Anybody that's really active on social media, they'll tell you it's a lot of work. So
totally.
The other things that make it difficult is, live music has been taking a hit over and over and over. Every venue has downward pressure.
Yeah, that's another thing I've been hearing anecdotally from indie artists that are nationally known, saying things like, the tour is break even at best. Probably going to lose money on it. Like, people used to say, oh, you make all your money touring, right? Well, apparently not really. Like, whoa.
Yeah, not anymore. That's changed. I think that's changed due to so many factors. We all know that there are real questions about Live Nation's actions in the business, bigger promoters pushing out smaller, more local promoters, consolidations and restructuring of how this works.
Cuts of merch and things like this.
Well, yeah, because you push out all the other people, so now you really only run the game in a given city, and then you take a cut of all of that merch. The fact that a venue or the apparatus coming into a venue to run the show would take a cut of merch is unbelievable. Unbelievable. Yeah. I don't think you can find for all the shit talking that I've done here, I don't think you could find a more insane aspect of just taking from artists than that.
Yeah.
What, they get a penny and now you're going to take a piece of their shirt? That shirt is the reason the whole thing is going to happen, right?
Yeah.
That could pay the gasoline.
Right. Merch has been apparently the one thing that's really good, still, but
yeah.
And the trick is, I think that it costs more to tour. Gasoline, a different thing. When I was touring as a young person, you could figure out how to not work for, a month or something. You could risk it. It was a little different. It's a little harder now, rents up across the entire board. Everybody, it's a little harder to just jump in the van with your friends and live off Pabst Blue Ribbon. It's like, well, I got to make a couple bills a day, right? So you're the band leader, you got 4 bandmates, you know, there's your $800, there's your $1,000 or $1,500 a day that you kind of need to be making. And that is not what most little touring acts are doing, right? So it's changing the shape of music as we knew it. Like I grew up in a super music focused town here in Montana called Missoula that was right on the 90 highway, had bands nonstop.
Cool.
Nonstop. Yeah. I ran sound and ran a small studio in a youth center. We had 4 or 5 touring bands a week.
Wow. Just
coming through being like, we just want to, you know, do all ages shows, and it's just a stop on the road, right?
Yeah.
It's not the same. And I wish that it was. Like that was some cool stuff.
Yeah.
But music is not that anymore, you know? And so that, talk about the downward pressure. I think that relates to the marketing, to the what should an artist do?
Yeah.
Boy, go play some shows, figure out some creative ways to go do that part of it. And that has downward pressure, because even a winery or a singer-songwriter might be able to go do some covers, but also sneak in a couple of their originals.
Yeah.
That could be a profitable game. That could be a helpful game. Even wineries or bars, they all have this incredibly strong downward pressure due to the cost of rent going up, especially through COVID. The rent prices, the lease cost is all getting transferred, handed down to the artist. Well, how many people can you bring?
Right.
Okay, well, yeah, but simultaneously, doesn't your bar just have people? Because that's like, you're in the business of selling booze. I'm in the business of singing to them.
Yeah.
You know, like... You know, we're all in this grand struggle together, and you know, all that creates a very, again, I'm like the Grim Reaper.
Like, I wish we could end on a more positive note. But,
sorry, guys. No, again, people are making music. I'll tell you the positive note: starting a recording fund, and now watching recordings happen has categorically, like, fundamentally changed the way that I think of music.
Okay, cool.
I can watch the Grammys, which is a kind of a new thing for me. I can look at really great, huge hit records. I can look at all these applications come in and say, like, oh my God, they're doing the thing. It's music. They're just making it.
Great. Yeah.
Holy cow.
Yeah. Even despite everything, despite everything, how difficult it is.
They are out there. They're doing it. They're hope, right?
Yeah.
They're giving the language. So I think the positive note here is that while I know that things are as precarious as they've ever been, I've probably never believed in music more. Right? I always have, but again, born and raised doing this.
Yeah.
But you spend a certain amount of time in the music business as a producer, you do get a little bit of like, well, why didn't I write that? Why didn't I produce that? Why didn't they come to my studio?
Yeah.
That's natural. Sure. I know writers do that all the time. Why didn't I get invited to that writing session? You know, we're on the same publisher. Why did they, you know, that sort of stuff. Seeing people just do it, contribute to it, excel in it, create it, say bolder things, have a clearer message that is beautiful, you know. I was just hearing a song that I think he's going to release on Friday, Jake Wesley Rogers. Was it God Bless or something? You know, that guy, he just spins the sense of like, God bless all this big, beautiful mess, right? You know, just the what music is doing and being willing to say that's beautiful.
Yeah.
We have a lot of uphill battles, but what it's doing, what it's willing to say, the commentary music has always been about protest on some level. It's always been about saying something that's happening. So I think that's all beautiful. You know, yes, we have some uphill battles, but that is beautiful.
Yeah. The other thing that's beautiful is, you know, the removal of gatekeepers is a good thing in a lot of ways, because all kinds of people who would be able to get their music out in a way that anyone would hear it now can. I mean, that you can't deny.
You're 100% right.
You know, despite the devaluation music, like there is this opening of opportunity for people to share, which is nice.
That's 100% right. And that's probably something that I don't, in the dwelling on what's happening out here, I'm not seeing that enough. And by me saying I'm glad that they're out there making it, and that's amazing, I should have said, wow, a lot of the gatekeeping has been released. People are actually making some incredible music out there.
Yeah.
Because there is less of a chokehold on what they can and can't do. Now, I'm sure a lot of these artists still have their label duties. They're still, bound by these things, but we are actually seeing a shift in a lot of that. And that's a beautiful thing for exactly what you said.
Yeah.
So thank you for reminding me.
No problem.
I'm positive about it because we have all of this actually happening. I think it's great that people are trying to figure out how to produce themselves, record, do these things. That's net positive. That's impacting them at a human level to embark on that journey, Yeah,
and more voices are being heard.
It fundamentally changes them. Making art, we think of it as outward, but making art is an inward, internal process.
And it's a two-way street kind of, because especially when you go play show, like, and you see people's reactions and then you hear from your fans, and it really is a beautiful thing for the artist and for the music fan. And so that's all great. And I just hope we can get some more money towards these artists so that they can thrive, and the whole community of what Brian and I do, and everything can thrive too. And it's a whole ecosystem of music makers and people involved in that, and then the
ecosystem.
Yeah,
there are very few conversations that really talk about the ecosystem that is affected by what is by change. It's okay that things change, but when we say, man, an artist only gets paid 1/3 of a cent. Well, how do you think they pay the people that help make those recordings? That's the ecosystem is what is really important, and we preach about that all the time when I'm trying to find support and find funding. And, I think we're just in a long process. I think that, if anything, this is our chance over the next, say, decade to really define, like, what do we want music to be in culture, in modern civilization? We've never actively taken a role in deciding that.
Yeah, it's sort of happened.
But what do you guys want it to be?
Yeah.
What does Recording Fund want it to be? What do the other grant-making organizations want it to be? What does Universal want it to be? Like, what do we actually want this to be, right? That's our opportunity.
Yeah. Go out there and make it happen.
That's our opportunity to create positive change and positive outcomes for this thing, I'm switching into a whole other part of the brain. I'm like, be positive, damn it, But this is the chance, I ask everybody, like, what do you want the next 100 years to be like, because we're at 100 years of one way of doing it. A lot of beautiful music has been made.
Yeah.
And I would argue that beautiful music was made mostly because of beautiful people doing the artistic work.
And being granted that sort of space and time to do it, which
exactly, they were the money.
Yeah, that's part of it.
The conditions. It creates the conditions for that to come out of, right?
Yeah.
And so if we really, let's take it to the spiritual side, right? All things arise out of conditions. Said the Buddha. What are the conditions from which music can thrive for the next 100 years?
Yeah.
While we have a new form of thriving in more people being able to join this thing called music, right? The changing of gatekeepers has allowed more voices, being able to get into digital distribution, right?
Yeah.
The on-ramps to this, right? You can get into DistroKid and go up and do that. That's all beautiful. But really, what are the conditions for a thriving music ecosystem in the world? But let's start here in America.
Yeah.
What does that look like? And it's not going to be me that answers it. And my one pitch here for how to deal with it might not even be the right answer. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm in it.
Yeah.
I'm deep in it, and been years deep in it, for free.
Right.
We don't bring in enough I don't make anything from this. And I don't even know if it's the right pitch, but I'm pretty sure that it's the right thing to yank on. And say, what does this look like? Let's create change. I realize, like, maybe I should be going to government, minus what's happening with the government at the moment. Maybe I should be going to the NEA and saying, like, well, how the hell can we change some of this?
Right. Well, in the meantime, you guys out there listening should check out recordingfund.org. And maybe put in an application, because it's definitely a great organization. No strings attached. They're not even going to like get in there and be like, well, we think that you're doing the wrong kind of music. You should be doing this, or you know what I mean. They're not like that. They're not going to get in your session. They're not going to ask for any money.
Too bright.
Yeah, the snare drum is too bright. They're not going to say any of that. They're not going to ask for any residuals after the fact. It's just a very beautiful organization. Thank you for starting it, Max.
Yeah, man. Thank you.
And cool. Well, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you guys for wanting to know more about it.
You're welcome. Yeah, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and hope everyone got something good out of it, and positive vibes for the future.
Positive. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for reminding me.
It's all good. All right. We're going to sign off. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Yep. Thank you.
Take care.
See you.
Thank you all.
Bye. That's our show for today, folks. Thanks so much for listening to Prepping for the Studio. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a 5-star review on whatever platform you listen to your podcast from. And don't forget to subscribe and tell your friends. Episode info and my ebook, A Musician's Guide to the Recording Studio, are available at preppingforthestudio.com. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out there. Prepping for the Studio was recorded and edited at Rarefied Recording by me, Roy Silverstein. Theme music written by myself and Ariel Levine. Performed and recorded by Ariel Levine. Many thanks to my co-host Brian Scheuble and you. Best of luck to you and your musical endeavors. And remember, as Alexander Graham Bell once said, before anything else, preparation is the key to success. We'll see you next time.